All right, another totally rewarding chats episode. And as usual, I am joined by Paul. How's it going?
All good. Snowy day here in Chicago.
I know, and cold in the, it's coming for a while. It's going to be cold in the, anywhere north. I appreciate you having some stuff in the background this time. For those on the video, Paul has escaped the insane asylum and has got out of the plain white room or the plain whiteboard they let you draw on.
Have you not been watching the last 3 or 4 episodes we've recorded, Sean? Like, that's not new today.
Maybe it wasn't. One, that's probably not untrue, that I was not perceptive. And I guess the second piece is I probably just didn't want to spend that much time looking at your stare.
It's okay that you don't look at me. Like, I'm fine with that. But, like, the background hasn't actually changed.
Okay. All right. So that's on me. Super stoked to have Patty from Campari here. And we're, talking before. I am not going to try to pronounce your last name, so you can do that if you'd like. Thanks for showing up.
No, thank you so much for the invitation. It's not that difficult. It's Pinies. And it's my family on the father's side was from Spain, from Catalonia. So it's like a very uncommon last name, but it's okay.
My favorite thing when people they speak and you bounce into the Spanish version of the town name and then you bounce right back to English. Like, I don't know how, like, it just flows out that way.
It sounds romantic when you do it, though, right? Like, there's this vibe to it that definitely, I'm like, yeah, I'm from Elmhurst, right? That's not a very exciting town.
That's right. The town name was cool. So give us your background. So Campari now, so talk about that role, but also just kind of how you got where you are. And I always think it's cool to ask. We didn't before. Did you choose to be in compensation? So it'd be interesting to hear your journey, where you started.
Yeah, that's a question that I think everyone in comp gets. So I'm born and raised in Venezuela in Latin America, which is a lot in the news lately. So everyone is asking me like, what's going on and how do I feel? And then most of my HR career has been in the compensation side. I would say when I started college, I really didn't like it, but I thought maybe at that point before joining college, I thought I wanted to be a dentist, and then it didn't work out. And thank God I was not a dentist. Probably I would have been like a very miserable one. And then I started studying industrial relations, which was a very open-ended like career and would allow you to get a lot of education that was foundational so you could dedicate to many other things. But on my third year, I had this teacher, which I'm still in touch with, I have to say. And he was the manager for 3M and rewards. And my school was like very old school. It was like Catholic school, my university, and it was like very, theoretical in many ways. And this guy brought in like practices and he's like, build a merit matrix in class. And I really loved it to the point that I was his, like student and supported him in the next year. And I've been in touch. And I think since then I really love comp. Then, right after college, I was working for Kraft Foods, which is now Mondelez. Mm-hmm. And I had this one in a lifetime opportunity to work in their headquarters that were in Rybrook as part of a program they did with ISEC. Basically what they did is they partnered up with ISEC and they had 40 students, like 40 professionals, early professionals from around the world that came and worked in headquarters in each of the teams. And then the opportunity was if you had a good trainship that lasted 18 months, that you would go back either to your country or to another country to continue working in the company. So I had, right after college, 18 months working directly in headquarters for Latin America. And it was an opportunity to work on merit processes, consolidating, working with a lot of countries, messing up processes and having to fix them. I remember messing up like databases. And even now I'm like, okay, I need to do it this way because I knew I messed it up. And that, like, for everyone that was part of the program, I'm still in touch with a lot of people from that time 20 years ago. And it was really foundational for my career, coming to the US, and connecting with so many people and so many nationalities was an amazing opportunity. And then I went back home to Venezuela. I worked there 7 years. I worked in Mondelez, most in reward. Then I moved to Diageo, which is biggest alcoholic beverage company. And I had the opportunity to come again to the US in 2019 to be rewards for the Latin America region. And I've had other opportunities there too. Like, I think Diageo is known for having a lot of organizational changes and moving people around. And I was there 13 years and I had so many opportunities in so many different geographies, being part of the global learning team, being reward, being an HR business partner, and working for Latin America, working for Asia, working at the headquarters in London in executive reward. And then 3.5 years ago, I had the opportunity of joining Campari, moving back to the US, which is something that me and my family wanted to do. I think we spent the pandemic in Singapore in a very small apartment, and that was rough. And then one of the things that caught my attention the most about this opportunity was they were going through this transition in the HR function transformation, and they wanted to review all of the global processes. So it was an opportunity to take all the knowledge that you have and really lead a change. And that has been most the focus in the past 3 years. And I would say I'm very proud of like some of the changes that we've done. And I've been able to lead things around processes, transparency, incentives, leading, like defining the philosophy and benchmarks and things that we started in Americas and then became like the standard for global. So it has been a great ride. But short answer, yes, I've wanted to be in compensation.
Wow.
You're the one. You're the one who wanted to be in
One.
compensation.
Yeah.
You're one.
Yes.
Yeah. Our sample size is getting larger. Now we found the one. So
That's right.
Yes.
Look at that.
actually,
Look
there
at
was
that.
someone that we had one other that said they had decided they wanted to be in HR, not maybe comp. But yeah, in general, it's interesting to watch all the paths there. So it is interesting. And it's interesting that it was a person, a teacher who kind of brought the practicality in. And that's what you were like, actually, I want to solve the practical problems, kind of a cool thing. So before we get started, I know you're aware of it. We have the speed round of questions. So let's see. Coffee or tea?
Fee all the way.
Well, you're at Campari, so your beverage of choice, your drink of choice if you go out.
So my favorite Campari drink, I would say it's Aperol Spritz, but I am also fond to Espolòn tequila. I've been in the plant and it's very magical to see. So I have a connection with the brand too.
Okay.
Do you still go back to any Diageo brands? Right. Once you develop an affinity, I can't imagine you can just sort of not say it, but like nod, like I get it. Like,
No, it's fine. I can also say that one of my favorite brands of Diageo was Tanqueray, and I really loved gin and tonics.
Yeah. You have a weekend away magically. Would you prefer it at a posh resort or out in the woods camping?
I've done a lot of camping in my life already. So I would say resort, but regardless of that, I just want to go to a real beach. I would say I was spoiled growing up with amazing beaches, and now in the Northeast, there's amazing places here, but I miss like a real clear waters, warm
I'm going to
beach.
have to go back and revisit the questions, because I think this beach thing, every time I ask, not every time, there's a large number of responses are like, I don't like that question, Sean. I just want to go to the beach. Okay. I less care about the resort level, but that there's a beach.
Or maybe it's the winter thing that it's making us miss it more.
Yeah. You're more inclined to the beach now than other days, perhaps.
That kind of same thing in mind. You have traveled a lot. What is the one vacation place you want to go to that you haven't been to yet?
My husband and I would love to go to Japan. When we lived in Asia, because of COVID, we were not able to travel. Japan was closed, and we were in Singapore that was also very closed. But it's one destination that we really want to do.
Right. And the last infamous one, are you chunky or creamy peanut butter?
I think I'm leaning towards creamy, but growing up in Venezuela, peanut butter was not a thing, to be honest. So it's more of a thing I acquired as I moved to the States as an adult.
I think we're seeing the interesting message for, I think, a lot of people from this is like what we think is something that's everywhere, right? The shelves of it in the U.S. As soon as you get outside the U.S., it's just not as big a thing.
Now, is there the bonus question, right? So think about like the role peanut butter plays, right? Like kids grow up on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, right? People like Sean only eat peanut butter because it has sort of this protein. Is there like a Venezuelan equivalent? Like there's like this is the ubiquitous sort of lunch food, or is that just not a thing in a market like Venezuela?
I would say it's not necessarily only lunch, but I would say our food for excellence is the arepa, and we eat it like morning, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You could eat at any time. It's basically like a cornbread that you can fill with whatever you want. There's this debate between Colombians and Venezuelans on who is it really the creator of the arepa. Of course, Venezuelans say it's Venezuelan.
You're allowed to say that, yeah. I was just curious, right? Because like we're hearing this peanut butter's not a thing. Well, what is the thing? Like, what's the thing that kids grow up saying, "Oh yeah, I have a passion for that."
Well, we just had kind of interestingly, this will be 2 out of the last 3. As this gets whatever order they get posted. We just had a guest who was from Venezuela. And is now at Towers, and he was talking about their kind of breakfast spread that's ubiquitous.
Yeah,
and he remembers more in Mexico. He's in Mexico now.
Hey, this is Brent Skinner, host of Small Talk Window here at the Work Defined Podcasting Network. Have you ever wanted a short podcast to listen to during a coffee break of your workday? You've come to the right place. My guests dispense with the small talk as quickly as possible and settle into a meaningful conversation around the world of work.
So as we go into the main thing, just to let you get started with, I thought it was interesting. One of the things you said was actually I moved to the U.S. to manage Latin American rewards, which is not uncommon. Talk a little bit about managing rewards across multiple geographies. And obviously, you think about it, we just heard that you were in Europe, Latin America, North America, and Asia. So a super unique perspective. And then across all that, what's been successful or not successful, and including now the whole pay transparency and equity journey.
Yeah, sure. So I would say this has also evolved as my career has evolved. I would say at first it was more like trying to influence. And then on my second time around, because I led Latin America 2 times, it was more like, okay, driving it as a true COE and implementing changes. I would say that one of the things to keep in mind when you're leading like different teams, and probably you're like, oh, it's rewards. It's the same goal across the board, and this is what you have to do. So you have to be really mindful about the culture that surrounds anything you do and how that impacts your goals, right? And I'll put an example. When I was leading the Latin America team, one of the things we wanted to do is consolidate on the benefit space, which is a very common thing to do, right? You go, you look for a broker that will support you at a regional level, you have standards, but then we're like, okay, we're going to be setting up standards of care. And for Latin America, it was very easy. I had people in my team that spoke the same language. I kind of understood the culture, and it was pretty easy to do, and we were very successful at doing it. And then I moved to APAC, and I remember my boss saying, like, okay, now you just have to do the same thing in there, because it was the same boss that was my leader at Latin America. He oversaw North America, Latin America, and APAC. And I'm like, oh, okay, I have my tools. Let me just go and do the same thing. And then I started seeing like, wait a minute, like probably I need to do similar things, but I have to understand how all these nuances and how it's accepted by culture, right? So probably some things that we had to find as a standard of care that for the US or other developing markets would be like, you wouldn't even question it. Providing coverage for same-sex spouses or things like that. There are other countries where you cannot even talk about those things, right? So how do you create space to standardize, also understanding the context, the legal context on each of the countries you operate? That was like very eye-opening, I would say. I was telling to you guys when we were preparing for this that when I joined APAC, one of the biggest issues that we were having with some of what they call developing countries in APAC is we had a very high turnover in countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and there was also a huge opportunity to grow in those markets because our let's say market share was very low. But how do you do it? How do you do it without turnover that reach out like 30%? It's very difficult. So we had to look into, okay, let's understand what is the talent that we're fighting for, what are the nuances of these markets. And in that moment, as a alcoholic beverage company that was looking into a majority Muslim country, the talent force that we were working on is very small. People who were willing to work for an alcoholic beverage company. So it made us like, okay, we have to be more competitive. We have to communicate our offers in different ways. What are the things that we need to offer? How do we engage candidates from the beginning? And it was a very eye-opening experience.
Yeah, that's an interesting case example, right? When you think about, I mean, I've operated globally too. I've never really had to sit back and say, like, what are almost demographic and preferences that most people don't think about, right? Like, we're going to operate in this space. We have an office in this market. Here's who those people are. And as a result, we're going to look kind of funny to them, right? Or, the closest is I know I worked for an investment company that had a China office, and people in China don't invest, right? At least at that point, that really wasn't a thing. So finding people who knew anything about what we did was really hard. I just never thought about it from a religious perspective as well. So it's a unique example that you don't come across quite as often.
Yeah, no, that's a great example too. I also experienced some things with China, which also was probably a market I didn't know and that much about until I moved to APAC and I had to do like this deep dive on China. And what I would say most recently when I came back to the US and now in Campari in the role that I'm leading a very diverse region that has countries that are as evolved as the US and Canada and legislation wise from a pay transparency perspective. But then also in my mix, I have countries like Latin American countries like Mexico and Argentina where probably there's legislation, but not as evolved. And then also we have Jamaica, which is in Campari, the company J. Nephew is the first company in Jamaica. It's one of the biggest employers in the island. It's a very important company. And we this past year in 2025, we made changes to our practices and recruiting practices to support pay transparency, even in those places where there was no legal mandate, right? So we said, okay, going forward, you cannot ask anyone for previous compensation. Let's think about these are countries that they were even asking pay slips to candidates, right? So having to break that cycle and explain, why are we doing this? Why is it important? How to approach candidates? And we created a multifunctional team with TA, with HR business partners and rewards to work on this, connect with the countries, understand their concerns, and then put a practice in place. And the reception, even from candidates, has been great. Candidates in Brazil say, we love the transparency. We love how forward you are with the information, and people are really appreciative of those changes, even though there's not like a requirement for us to do so.
So I'm curious, just because in your comments so far, you've presented two different examples where the conclusion was pretty different, but I think on the surface, they can express themselves the same. And it's, definition of family when thinking about standard of care for benefits in Asia. You can't do that, right? And we get that feedback from sort of local people. You can't do that here. Whereas, in Jamaica, I imagine you got a little bit of you can't do that around, asking about pay. So I guess talk about how you worked through what do you mean by can't do that? Like, how did you decide, when do you take, and I don't want to call it an American approach, but sort of a global approach of, no, we're going to do this, versus when do you decide to default to the kind of culture norms, of course the law, but like, your conclusion was different in two different scenarios. So just talk us through the process of knowing when to be more global and when to be more local.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think the conclusion is first understanding the legal landscape. And in some cases, you cannot do that because basically the law doesn't support it.
Bright line there.
And that's like, okay, we're not doing it. But in the most recent case around pay transparency, even though there is no mandate for companies to publish ranges and to be upfront on the compensation, it has been demonstrated that is a practice that really supports pay transparency and that supports pay equity, right? And one of the things that we have worked is making sure that we review every step of the way, that we're very close with talent acquisition at the moment of hire, that we're very close with the countries whenever we have salary reviews and we check any potential deviations, and that we kind of monitor because any step of the way can mess up your pay
Sure.
equity, right? So we're like working with all the partners, and because there was not a legal reason that we couldn't do it, and instead there were many good reasons for us to do it, we kind of supported that way. And we knew there were concerns from the countries around like, oh, like we have always asked candidates for their salary. Does this mean that we're going to be inflating salary? Does this mean that we're going to be sharing ranges? And now people are going to go all the way to the top. And we also had experience from the past 2-3 years in the US where New York, for example, made the change, right? And we know for a fact that candidates don't necessarily go to the top of the range because we can explain this is a range and we're dividing it based on skills, experience, equity,
Sure.
and we're going to define a salary that aligns to your profile and also internal equity. And people are very appreciative of the information there. So we kind of check, okay, we can do it. And then we see all the upsides of doing it. And I think in that way, we kind of convince people slowly, little by little, on the benefits of doing it. It's not something that happened in one day. It took, I think, 6 months of workshops with every country, understanding their concerns, listening to them, bringing back people who have gone through that experience and seeing the benefits from it. Also having kind of like a global mandate in terms of we have participated in the past 2 years and obtained the certification as a fair pay company. So we're like, okay, we're participating on this and we committed to these things. So we have to push in making the changes.
Got it.
Also for our certification.
Yeah, that's helpful. Having that sort of mandate helps you make the choice on the margin. Like, well, look, we've said we're going to do this and we're going to deploy the tools in our toolkit, right? Like,
and it was not me. Someone else decided that we would go into the certification. So I'm just making it happen.
That's right.
I think that there were two things. Last time I saw you in person, there were two things I kind of took away. One was just, it's the coolest staircase in the world at the Campari head office. So you go up the staircase, Paul, and it's like you're in the bottle, in a Campari bottle is the philosophy. It's actually really cool. It's red in there, like really red. So Paul's going to go Google it.
That is a search waiting to happen here. Yeah.
So that was one thing I took away, Patty. But the other one that I took away when I chatted with you there, and we've talked a couple of times, is how important it is to you to work with your HR business partners in TA, how passionate you are, and how you almost take it for granted now from the standpoint that that's a part of your job. Can you talk a little bit about how you know, one, why you find it so important, but also then how do you actually make that happen? Because I think a lot of people philosophically, you know, especially pay equity and transparency, right? There's two ways to fix it. There's, fixing it, and then there's preventing the problem on the way in issue.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that's something you've done really well at your stops, and it caught me when we were in New York on how it's just a part of your job.
Yeah. No, and I think you give it for granted, but then you shouldn't, right? It's something that it's very important. And since I joined, the person who leads TA in Campari, it's one person that we have partnered really well. She joined just a little bit before I did, and then she hired me. And I think that also brought in like a bond that was very important. And there's also the person that leads the talent team. And I think the three of us are very close in the things that we're working on, and that the functions do not operate on silos. But more specifically with the talent acquisition team, because there were a lot of things that had to be built, I think that really helped in making sure that when they were built in the right way. Before having this leader in talent acquisition, Campari didn't have a talent acquisition team. And it's one of the things that they put in place with the transformations. And the talent acquisition team, was built thinking about the most progressive practices and how do we do it in the right way and how do we partner from the beginning. So we have been very close in that sense. And then it kind of has given me the way to think like, okay, if we want this really to work, what do I need from you and what do you need from me? And we have created that space, and we have created a space to say also like, this cannot happen, right? Whenever things go awry and I get this, I get this situation about like, oh, we cannot hire because we don't have the right salary range or whatever. Like, I never deal with those things on my own, but I try to bring it back to the team. And we always make it that it's like a team effort. And I always say, look, it is possible that the salary range might not be right, and I'm more than happy to review. It's possible that we're not looking for the right candidate because you want a Ferrari, but you have a Corolla budget. That happens a lot of times. But as long as we always approach it with a team mindset, I think it really helps in making sure that it's a team connection, and of course involving also the HR team, HRVP or HR leader that it's responsible for that team. So we're always daydreaming, like, okay, what is the next thing? We have been working very closely in our goals for pay transparency, and the talent acquisition person was also, let's say, we were both the sponsors of the project that made the changes happen last year. And now we're thinking, okay, what's next? What are we going to do now? They're implementing a lot of, they implemented Phenom that uses AI. And we're thinking about what are other things that we can develop to support the process from a comp perspective as well.
Do you spend time training? Like, I'm curious how far
Yes.
you try to educate them on the comp philosophy, or do you just send over the rules?
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time communicating what the philosophy means, both like to HR teams and talent acquisition teams, because our talent acquisition team supports the region, and they might be hiring in Jamaica but based in the US, and you need to make sure that they truly understand how does compensation work in those markets. So we have even created like guides per country that talk about the country and the business and the specificities for those countries. And now we're ensuring that those guides are kept up to date with changes in legislation, changes in practices, changes in benefits. And that's a tool that the talent acquisition team uses to bring in new people. So communication, training, information is it's key, because you want to not to create yourself indispensable, but make sure that everyone can operate without you. Right.
Yeah, I found it jumped back into my head, Sean, that sort of philosophy versus rules. Like, rules get gamed really quickly. Like, recruiters are motivated to fill jobs, and tell me the rules, great, and I'll figure out how to get what I want. Philosophy is a lot harder to game, right? So if people understand intent and why, you know it when you're doing something wrong, right? Whereas rules, you can just create, exceptions, or, oh, this job's not really that level, it's that level. Like, there's ways to manipulate the rules. So I think first principles is always people need to understand why something exists. You can also give them rules, but if the why is clear and aligned, you tend to get better outcomes than dictating the guidelines only.
Yeah, and I think it's much better when you do that than what is the legal term? There's no case without remedy or something.
Right.
Basically, if you don't put a pen, do you penalize for getting outside the range, or do you educate them on what they're doing, holistically? Carrot or stick is probably more simplistic for someone like me than, legal term. But I think that type of thing, it sounds like you're in the carrot mode of like, we're in this together. This is what happens as we go through.
Yeah, we have also worked a lot. I've been like the pusher of creating a community across the region, using teams, making sure that people know where to find things. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm showing you the first time. Here it is. I'm hoping that you go and look for it. And look, people come and say like, oh, I forgot where this is. I'm like, don't worry, here's the information, but trying to create a place where people can get information. So for this pay transparency thing, we kind of revamped also our teams community to make sure that HR communities were able to find like our documents for talent, for reward, for all the functions in a very easy way. And everything that linked also to pay transparency, we created tools for them to put together offers. We created tools for them to communicate offers. All the information I tell you about each of the countries, we also put it there so people can access on their own.
I mean, that is like, if from start to finish, how long could someone expect to kind of get a program like that in place? Because I think it's, you guys, like, your program's super impressive, which is why I wanted to talk. It's like, if you went somewhere and you were somewhere that didn't kind of have these things in place, what was the goal you would give yourself over a period of time to facilitate change?
I think it depends also on the ability of like the change management that is required, right? I would say probably a year at least, because you have to create a lot of foundational knowledge and information. But you also have to work with a team on different ways of working, maybe, and try to like educate and say, okay, we're going to be working a different way, and these are the benefits, and you have them to buy on it. So I would say at least a year. I've been in the role for 3.5 years. And I would say probably the first 1.5 to 2 years, the pay transparency was not a focus on itself, but everything we did from a philosophy, internal equity perspective kind of built on it, where the first year that we did the certification, probably everyone's kind of nervous what's going to come up. And the results were pretty good because we had already worked in a lot of foundational.
Now let's just pretend for a second you're out at a cocktail party, of course, drinking a Campari cocktail, and you meet somebody who woke up this morning and knew nothing about pay transparency, but they've got people in Europe. So they don't have a year. They've got 6 months. So what would your advice be? Like, other than buying them another drink to sort of take the edge off the panic that is now there, like, they don't have a year, right? And I'm pushing, and I apologize for sort of pushing, but like, how would you say, okay, you've got a more constrained timeline, at least to get something going? Where would you advise that they start? Because we talked to somebody in Europe last recording, probably it'll come in before this, and the assessment was there's a lot of people who don't realize what's in front of them still. So you've met somebody, and what's your advice to them, given that they don't have the time that they should be able to take to really do this well?
I think there's a lot of conversation around the structure that you have, and making sure that you have the right structure in place so you can compare equal work for equal pay. So in our case, thankfully, we did go through a review of our structure early last year in 2025, and that really helped us in putting it together in preparation for this. But I would say making sure that you have that and that you are able to compare roles that are similar in terms of responsibility, skill. I'm forgetting the name. I know that has a name. There's a name that Nancy from Sydney always talks about. Your pay structure.
She uses the terms job architecture or compensation structure. I think job architecture might be where you're going.
Architecture.
Another shout out that just by first name. So I'll have to give Nancy
right? She is a first name person. Like, so there's no last names.
We have to add her to the schedule now, Paul. I think there's a critical mass of the number of times that your name is mentioned without your last name that we have to add you. So
yes, I love her.
Getting the job architecture in place.
And then I would say not to be afraid. I think a lot of companies are afraid to make a change because they think like, oh, our people are going to start talking about salaries. They do already, honestly. Like, it happens. And the fact that you don't do it doesn't necessarily stop them from doing it. And I think the most transparent you are, it really builds on the trust and confidence of your employees. So not being afraid, moving ahead, and maybe, and I know there's a lot of thought right now around like, how are we going to be responding to requirements on right for information? And we still don't know 100%. We're exploring some routes and making sure that we create something for countries in Europe to be self-sufficient to this, but also that we support as a COE, because we have countries where we might have like one HR person and they're not going to be like creating reports, right? But I would say not be afraid of being open on this. We did a lot of education, rewards education across the region in the past 2 years. And we started with the hardest country. We started with Jamaica. We went to the plants and the distilleries, and we talked to people at every level of the organization. And then this year we did for many countries, and we will continue doing so. And the response from people is very open and appreciative and thankful that they now understand better. And I would say the third thing is make sure that you involve the leaders and are very clear of what their role is in this space.
I think I'd tell you it was Article 7. If I get it right, Paul. Article 7, the right to information. Senior moment. And may that be my biggest senior moment, that I don't remember EU PTD articles. Like, I know if I can't, like, that may that be the most. But I think that's the one that's really interesting, Patty, because I think Paul and I both hypothesized, like, everyone's going to ask because you can. And then every time there's a change in that department, people are going to ask and they're going to keep the old one and be like, the new person may. And so I don't think it's a project thing where you're like, on this day, everyone's going to ask, but they're all going to ask on day one. And then you're going to have to do it as a project. But it's just going to be this consistent trickle of stuff.
Yeah.
So that, Paul joins the team. I want to know how much more money Paul makes than me. And I could do that if I keep all the little, dots from before.
Yeah, I heard that. I heard that episode and it's like, yeah, you have people that probably are going to do that. But so how do you do it in a way that doesn't create extra burden to the teams? Because we seriously have teams that have one person and they're responsible for so many other things. So how do you create something that it's very easy? Because all the information is in the systems. How do you do it in a way that
the
gives them
EUPTD created a lot of work for companies, but no resolution to how to get it done.
Yes.
And as Paul's heard me say before, the one department you can be pretty certain isn't getting any more money or people is HR or total rewards. That just doesn't happen. So.
Yeah.
This has been awesome. So the question we always ask, and you have such this wide range at the end, is if you, in all those things, if you could auto-magically solve one thing in HR, what would it be?
I really would love to create a tool where maybe we I think from compensation perspective, we're kind of setting up the guardrails a lot, right? Like we're the ones in many cases defining the number and the salaries, and how can we create something that we don't have to do that anymore and that managers are self-sufficient. And I know there's AI tools now being created to support in this space. So I'm looking forward to that because I think that will allow HR to be like less the police in many processes and the controller and be more like the coach for the leaders. And if a leader makes a bad decision, of course we don't want that, but it will sometimes happen. And trust me, they're going to learn from that decision, right? So, it's creating more tools to reduce the admin burden. But I think sometimes HR also wants to keep that control. So how do you make it in a way that it feels, or HR doesn't feel they're losing something, but they're gaining an opportunity to be more of a strategic advisor?
I thought you were going to go with an Aperol spritz machine in every HR department. I thought it was going to...
That already exists.
Oh, it exists? Oh, the HR just doesn't share that information. I'm not in HR, so I'm just not aware of that.
There may be different machines at the top of the magical red staircase too than exist in most places. So
it is one of the coolest to wrap up. Like it is a super cool office. The only thing I'm bummed out about is I didn't get to play foosball there. I didn't have time. So
you could probably make that happen. You could probably make that. You could probably make that.
I'm in town. Find out who's good at foosball there. I really appreciate you coming on, Patty. It's such a unique perspective. It's great that you were able to spend an hour with us.
No, thank you so much. I really loved it. Thanks.
And so for those listening, you can reach out. We'll put Patty's information in there. She's a wealth of information beyond being just a great human. So reach out and connect if you have questions. And we will check in with you guys next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.